free to keep cameras off to save on energy. I will, yeah. So thank you very much for joining today. Yeah, we're going to be discussing the agenda in the next hour. We've got a lot of different findings and points to discuss with you today. So we will be, sorry about that. We will be, I'll jump straight into the agenda and begin presenting our agenda today. So yeah, as mentioned, my name is Sarah Wilkin. I'm founder and CEO of Fly Green Alliance. In the last few years, we've actually been doing things like we developed a grant proposal with the University of Amsterdam, and in 2018 we were granted to turn waste into sustainable aviation fuel. But before that, I was beginning to work in football in 2018, more the social side of football. And when we gained the grant to work on sustainable travel through Booking.com, I thought it was an excellent kind of combination to. I saw that there was a lot of football, travel in football, and it would be great to combine the two efforts. So since then, we've gone on to Fly Green Alliance, FGA Sports have gone on to become a member of the UN's Football for the Goals. We've worked with Birmingham County FA. We've been consultants on the UEFA supported life tackle, done some of the first environmental focused workshops at St George's Park with Aston Villa and Wolves and more. And I've actually been selected as one of the founders, which in the group Women in Football, one of the founders that will be helped develop the business further. So we're very pleased to be working within football. And then on the travel side, we've been working with airlines and travel management companies, Amex, and Convex Insurance is our current sponsor. So that is us. Really, what I would like to kind of discuss about us today is that we are an alliance. We started to educate and mobilize. First educate ourselves and then educate travellers and businesses and investors. We're definitely about communication and dissemination, and today we will be doing presenting insights to you in this way. And then it's definitely about understanding cross-sector development so each sector can support each other. And then what we do generally is work with clients to support on product strategy and mechanisms. So we are finding new finance, doing research, developing projects with an environmental focus. To give you some bigger picture information, we are talking about climate and carbon reduction. There was a lot of big numbers to think about because at the moment, 80% of the world's energy is still from fossil fuels. And we have globally a carbon budget of 1 trillion tons. Now, from 1860 to current day, we've used 500 million of those. We've used half of our global budget in 160 years. Now, the predictions are that we will have used the rest of that budget in 10 years. So this is the big task at hand. And as we know, well, as you may know, that there's 5 billion football fans globally. And the revenue of football in 22 was 3 trillion. And just a comparison on this, it's oil and gas is worth around 4 trillion at the moment. And football as an industry, we definitely know it's got a lot of influence, and we know there is travel involved. So we think it's, the transfer window is a great example of what we can, for thinking and development in this area. So I'm going to hand over to Liam to discuss.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
Sorry, I forgot the housekeeping. Yeah, so if there's any questions as we go along, please add them to the chat, and then we'll answer them at the end. And if you've got any points, just add them to the chat, and we'll come to them at the end. Thanks very much. Sorry, go for it.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Yep, hello, my name is Liam McSherry, and I am the PR and Purpose Manager for Sokito. So yeah, if we can. Thank you. A quick introduction to Sokito, if you're not familiar with this. We are a new football boot brand based in the UK with a big focus on sustainability. Our boots are made with a minimum 56% recycled materials, and our ambition is to create the first circular boot. So where did it start? In July last year, Ben Mee pledged to offset the emissions generated by his domestic transfer from Burnley to Brentford. So this really was the sort of first instance of travel and emissions being, part of the conversation around the transfer window. So fast forward to January this year, Sokito ambassador and investor William Troost-Ekong was transferred on loan from Watford to Italian side Salernitana. Oh, still on that one, Sarah. So we thought this was an opportunity to see if we could do something around the international transfer. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, so with a willing player, we were able to gather travel-related data from the start of the transfer process through to the signing of the contract at Salernitana. So you can see a sort of overview, the sort of statistics involved, the number of people, total journeys, distance covered, and yeah, an estimate of the emissions. So yeah, no big surprise. The flights taken by Will and his brother were the biggest emitters during the transfer process. Next slide. This is a breakdown of the data that we were able to get from Will and the people involved in the transfer process. So just line by line, from leaving home through to the signing of the contract at the club. Next slide. So from our side, it was quite a straightforward process. Obviously just getting the data and then processing it. But from the player perspective, I thought it'd be quite interesting to hear what Will had to say in terms of how much hassle it was for him at the time.
Unfortunately, this is not playing, Liam. So we'll play this we'll send the links at the end. Okay, never mind. Yeah, spoiler, basically, it was zero hassle for him to gather the data from his brother and from his agent. I think he was actually on the flight and was able to, basically get the information very quickly and very easily.
Gathering the travel data around my transfer to Salernitana and also to PAOK wasn't actually any hassle. I actually did it on my flight to either of the destinations. So I just spent some time mapping out the destination of myself, my brother who came, and the agents involved. I asked them where they left from, what kind of transport they used, and I managed to pass it on to the team at Sokito. So yeah, it was a quick turnaround for them as well. They did the calculations. I think they took an average of different CO just to make sure that we weren't missing anything, and then we could come up with a figure quite quickly of how much we actually put out in order to make the transfer happen. So yeah, it was an easy process.
Great. So yeah, we chose to work with a company called Albarami to do the offset for the transfer. Albarami works collaboratively with farmers in Italy, in particular the olive industry, which has been hit pretty hard by climate change and disease. You can find more information about them at albarami.it. Next slide, please. What was interesting is, with this opportunity, the player was actually able to visit one of the participating farms in the Albarami scheme. So he was able to obviously see firsthand the effects of climate change, to learn about sustainable farming practices and plant a tree. So it was just a nice sort of addition to the story. Overall, I think the reception from press and from fans has been pretty positive. I think since we sort of had the announcement around the work in January, there's been sort of continued ongoing interest from the media and fans, up until actually this week. So yeah, we've been quite pleased with the response, and definitely feel like it's been a positive start to the conversation around travel admissions and the transfer window. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, just so there are a couple of examples of environmentally footballers that are players that are supported environment. If you have any other examples, it would be great if you could add them to the chat, just to kind of get an understanding of if you're aware of different players with that are being ambassadors for environmental topics. So feel free to leave them in the chat if you have any examples. So I will go on now. Thanks, Liam. So as we can see, there are multiple players now that are choosing to use their profiles for environmental topics, and Will is a great example. And he is one of the 16 investors in Sokito, player investors with a want to invest in the environment. So what I thought I would do now is go back a little bit to so Will was really talking about his own carbon footprint, and what we are doing as a company as well is working with or speaking with clubs and FAs, and Liverpool published their footprint in 2021, the Red Way, and I want to kind of talk through what that is meaning and what we can do with the data and work. And really our footprint is looking at the energy for the clubs or FA's operations. What we're doing is adding or knowing the paper trail or digital trail and know how to get to the data. And then what it is showing up different areas of energy use. So as we can see here, actually, electricity for Liverpool is 0 because Liverpool have gone into probably a 3 to 5 year contract with a green tariff, and they were able to kind of look at put it to a 0. And what they've done with their data is kind of gone into analytics and modeling. What you can do is show the totals, but then with matrices, etc., you can see which are the easiest ones to potentially offset, or the areas that are harder to abate, which we know is travel. So we can see that is a 0, and kind of the aims for the next 10 years for any company, a club, an FA, a bank, is to essentially get zeros across the board. Now we know that might be impossible, but it might be very difficult, but it is the target, and that's what we're kind of talking about to get to this 0 situation. Now we can also see from this footprint that fan travel is the highest. So we won't go into fan travel so much today, but we can see there are also other forms of travel, team travel and staff travel. So you can see that actually there's a bit of a misconception that team travel is the highest. Because of the private jet use, but it isn't generally the highest for a club or FA. They find it is definitely relevant, it is being looked into, but it is usually not the highest emitter. And what is happening with the roadmaps that are the next 10 years is that, as I said, working towards the zeros, incremental change. So what we are looking at and discussing today is team travel, player travel. And what we know from conversations and work is that it is generally by private or charter. Now, also when we talk about private or charter, it could be a plane the size of EasyJet that is privately chartered instead of it being a commercial flight. So it doesn't have to be 2 players, the whole team. It could be that staff and team travel together. We don't know that right now. but we'll look at specifically this kind of travel. We do also know the younger or more junior teams fly commercially, so that could be an EasyJet, a BA, etc. And that staff travel in the same way. And then fan travel, and another topic would be a combination of all forms of travel, especially if it's international matches. So, and then who we have been speaking to is, if the club is very kind of advanced in environmental commitments, they will have an ESG director or sustainability manager. If they might not do so, these are the kind of discussions that are coming up on topics such as the transfer window of travel. We ask that all the teams are speaking to each other. The travel manager and the travel management company, potentially procurement, is speaking with the sustainability manager, that they're also involved with the data team, business insights team. It might be an external data team, and that the commercial team are also aware of all of the priorities and pieces of work. Yeah, as I see some people have added their job title. It would be really helpful if you could just drop your job title into the chat so we can see the variety of people that are really interested in the topic, to see kind of the variety of roles that are involved right now. So this is what we're going to look at today: team travel, because in the transfer window. So Liam is, back to Liam actually, talking about what data we've looked at and how we've got that.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, yeah, basically after the work we did with Will, which was obviously just one example, we were, I think, curious to see what the picture we could build up around the wider January transfer window. So we started to look at the international transfers across 6 leagues and use the club and player data that's readily available from Transfermarkt as a starting point. But yeah, it's important to highlight that a number of assumptions had to be made, as we don't have access to, obviously, the real player data or data from the club. So we based the travel on the airports closest to and from the clubs involved, assumed that it was a commercial flight that was being taken rather than a private jet or other airplane type. So yeah, but I think given the number of transfers and distances involved, just with the data that we were sort of put together ourselves, we thought it was quite interesting. And it really was at this point that we got in touch with Flygreen Alliance to, I think, solidify the work and sort of dig deeper into it.
Yeah, and so what we will, so yeah, we did, yeah, there was, you can definitely find certain data. What we then did is look into assumptions and make a calculation, and we have asked Pace and Rob's, the team Rob is working with at Pace, to look into that data. They are aviation experts, so have access to this kind of data that is very accurate. I think so Pace has been audited externally by KPMG, and their data is 90%, 80% accurate. So hand over to Rob now to discuss what is possible with the data and some of the assumptions we have made.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name's Rob Neal. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Pace and the Head of Products and Innovation at Fexco. So Fexco, first of all, is a financial services company, 41 years old, based in southwest of Ireland, where we provide value exchange platforms for over 65 banks in 23 countries, and we employ 2,600 people. Pace is our first venture into ESG, and we've developed a platform to measure carbon emissions initially in aviation, but will, in due course, broaden into other verticals too. And PACE is an abbreviation of the Platform for Analysing Carbon Emissions. So it's designed to provide aviation stakeholders with clear and transparent and accurate data that was once previously only the domain of airlines, and it removes the dependency on airlines to provide any data. So we automatically track aircraft utilization in terms of what's flown and where. via a third-party flight tracking service provider. And then we apply our own methodology to estimate the fuel burned and the emissions generated. And this gives a sense as the overall coverage, where in 2022, sorry, Sarah, if you can just go back to the last slide. Where in 2022, we captured 29 million flights across 36,000 different aircraft types, 1,600 different airlines and smaller operators, and 265 different types of aircraft. And you can see over the past 5 years there, the total amount of emissions generated, the impact of COVID in 2020, and the gradual recovery. Last year there was, sorry, that should say 706 million tons of CO2 generated by the industry. So for this particular exercise, we applied our methodology to the transfer activity that Liam just mentioned. We modeled the emissions both for private jets and commercial aircraft, and I'll show you, explain that shortly. We determined the flight hours based on the distance between the two airports, and we applied a fuel burn per hour during flight for each respective aircraft type. We then calculated the CO2 using the industry standard conversion ratio of 3.16 tons of CO2 to fuel burned, and as I said, applied that to the transfer data supplied by Sokito. We had to make some assumptions as well. So we assumed that standard jet fuel was used. There was no sustainable aviation fuel applied. We also assumed that long-range private jets were used for the longer flight distance, and smaller jets were used for the shorter flights. And we also assumed that the airport closest to the respective football club was used. And in terms of the aircraft types, we picked 4 fairly common private jets that are often used in these transfer activities, ranging from the short distance turboprop from King Air to the Bombardier Global 6000, which is a medium to long range private jet. And then for the commercial aircraft flights and the modeling of those, we used 2 very widely used aircraft types. For flights under 4,000 kilometers, we assumed an Airbus A320, which is typically used by BA or Iberia and EasyJet. And for flights over 4,000 kilometers, we used the Airbus A330, typically used by Lufthansa, Virgin, Air France, etc.
Thanks, Rob. We can see, yeah, so there is definitely ways to make estimates. So what I want to kind of discuss is that we have made assumptions and we have estimated the totals. We did look across all 6 leagues, and we could see the carbon from each of those leagues, and there are certain findings. So there is, there's always it's a lot of data. There is, we found, we have the totals for each emissions. Actually, would anybody guess which league was the highest emitter? If you want to either come off mute to say it, or because there are the main leagues here, the 6 European ones. There is probably one you might assume would be the highest.
English Premier League?
Well, you think so?
Yeah, just thinking so, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is not in order. It is the Premier League. So, we can all debate who we think the best league is, who has the best players, but it really, it was the Premier League, and there were certain things that we did find out, and that it was, things like they had the most long-haul flights, the most international transfers into the UK. I think we were finding things like flights from Australia, flights from South America. Now, there's so many different ways you can kind of calculate the totals. We've made some industry standard assumptions and estimates. but there is, it's a lot of data, so we could do all sorts of things with that kind of data. We could match it with the most expensive players. Does it match? Does the highest carbon mean that? There's just many iterations of what you could make tables. That is one option, but what we didn't, there's just different ways, and what role we want to have is make that as accurate as possible, support clubs and FAs and players to know their own data, their accountability. But what we have found out is also in the aviation industry is that transparency of data leads to kind of greater benefit, economies of scale, buying power and things like that. If you know kind of the data accurately, you can do more things with it. And actually, the assumptions that we have in our tables and leaks for carbon, they might be higher than they actually are. So what our kind of hope is and want for the future is that clubs and FAs begin to be transparent about their data, and not necessarily publicly, but maybe it's with an association or maybe it's within a group, to then be able to do accurate, projects and developments with that data. So that's kind of our hope for the future, or one of ours. We'll come to more at the end. So yeah, I do want to come on to the topic of private jets and in the press, because it is very, very talked about topic. There is so much going on. Even at the weekend, in The Guardian, there was also an article on the 12 billionaires of the year. World, the richest 1% account for more emissions than the poorest 66%. So we definitely know it's a topic of equality as well, and there is a lot of big topics being discussed. More football happening in Europe. The championships are growing in size. 23-minute flight to Blackpool for Forest. There is a lot of call for sponsorship to be fossil fuel sponsorship to be banned. Again, what is the definition of fossil fuel sponsorship? These are just so many questions at Sport Positive. 80% of those attending said they didn't agree with fossil fuel sponsors. We know that a lot of the people attending have environmental jobs. Does it align with the commercial team? So these are a lot of things that we're finding out and starting to look into to develop strategies and plans for. And what we do know is, speaking to one of the private jet companies, is that 1 in 5 of their customers have purchased staff as an offset, and that when EasyJet discusses their offset figures, 1% of their customers offset. So we really also need to think about what is the discussion here, what impact and benefit could we have by football taking on board more environmental accountability and having more funds than a kind of Ryanair traveller to make that impact. So we want, our ask and our interest is making incremental and impact changes through really investigating what we've got on the table here. So it's definitely, and also it is, it's a reputation management topic. It's definitely all kind of strategically something to think about. And there, yeah, we've got a knowledge hub where we're bringing together all of the groups and the topics to, influencers, who's saying what. There is a QR code, which is also at the end, but we're putting everything together for those that are working on this topic. So as I mentioned, it is commercial. It is a commercial and sponsorship conversation. Now we know, for example, there are groups like, I think FAs has a no list, and it will be no to gambling, tobacco, some fast food, weapons, and there are the likes of Forest Green Rovers, where their sponsorship is entirely made of sustainable, low carbon sponsors, and that would be health, veggie foods, green energy, EV. And then actually what the majority of clubs or FAs do Where they do gain their sponsorship from is the middle group, and it is banks, it is data companies, Google, Microsoft, it is airlines, it is some food companies, and this is where a lot of the commercial revenue is gained from. So we understand very clearly when we speak and work with what the economic challenge is, and we definitely discuss there is no green switch. It is literally a lot of hard work and negotiations which gets you to this green position, and most are going to be in this in the middle area. And really what it is, what we are thinking about and discussing is that we want to almost displace to then build up the list of green future sponsors. Also maybe just question, what is the price of doing nothing? But then it is, can you also make a transition plan with your current? We know, there are many ways. So what we are discussing also with London City and others is how do you model and do the analytics to make these decisions? For example, the data companies are 1.5% of global emissions and airlines are 3%. So if you're going to make a decision based on what emissions they give to the global context, then these are some things you can think about. But also it's a tricky topic, but you can put data and decision making to it. It's definitely, and actually what I didn't say is that we do know that sponsorship can be, for one kind of sponsor, they can gain a club, for example, or FA, 2 to 35 million. And so that is a very big task to be able to potentially displace or switch in a new green sponsor that is able to generate that kind of revenue. Now that's going to take a lot of creativity, a lot of conversations, breaking the mold for sure, but it is likely that those that are in the middle lists are going to be asked to move to the kind of through the transition with their sponsored group. Now, financial sustainability is absolutely the topic. We cannot just switch off that middle group because revenues will be cut so much. So again, this is what we're definitely getting into the detail of at Fly Green Alliance and FJ Sports. And that's what we think is very valid, and we need to think about that a lot. So I'm going to hand over to Richard Curran from City, who is going to discuss the role of academia. So we've always worked with universities since the beginning. When we worked with University of Amsterdam with Booking.com, we think it's a real test ground, an opportunity. Also, if a club doesn't have funds to invest in ESG, which we're finding there is not always budget there. So the ask is, can you work with your commercial team? Can you carve out green funds? If there isn't, can the club or FA join? Can they join research projects? Can they do smaller pilots to then demonstrate to the business that the work is effective, and in the future it will gain the revenue that is required to keep the club going and profitable? So I'm going to hand over to Ricky at City.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. Yes, at City University, of course, in a sense, indeed, we come in with the research capability, which can augment the team. What we're looking to do here is a range of things, from looking at the overall strategy, helping to develop decision-making tools, and also on the implementation side. So if you see that diagram in the middle of the screen, in a sense, what we're doing is trying to develop simulations or models of what is going on, look at ways of improving that, which can be quite simple, optimization, and then looking at being able to monitor or measure what that is in terms of probability or statistics, for example. So on the next slide, Sarah, please, that just gives you roughly an idea of the sort of numbers involved in, for example, the average attendance, home attendance at clubs, ranging from Man U at 73,000 people. You're looking at probably a maximum of sort of 5 to 7 thousand or people who would be on that sort of level as a visiting member or a visiting opposition team. So obviously they have slightly longer typically travel considerations. On the right hand side, along with for example, pace, which Rob has already set out as a sort of, let's say, the solid framework in terms of the fuel burn. We also have the flights. You can see from sort of flight aware, these are currently the number of flights that are going on. So we can use this sort of data. On the next slide, taking that data, we can look at some, let's say, numbers that have been crunched in terms of averages. Now, these are the sort of things as well that you can then plug into PACE, or what we try to do from the university side is to augment the challenges for the accuracy of a lot of, let's say, the basic numbers that are involved. For example, here you see just from the extreme, if you're looking at a domestic flight, which is essentially probably not much over 1 hour. It's dominated by the takeoff and the landing, which are very inefficient in terms of fuel burn. Once you're into cruise and you're flying at a reasonable height, your fuel burn is much less because the drag is less. We jump to the other end of the spectrum and you have high-speed trains, which are very, very efficient in terms of emissions. So we're looking at this also, of course, as mentioned, in terms of, let's say, a strategy for the football clubs, the FA, and of course, ultimately FIFA and within the world game on how to be an exemplar to many of the stakeholders who are associated with this 5 trillion industry. On the next slide, what we see is just, punching some of these sort of numbers we're talking about on the basic level within the UK, numbers of well over 2 million in terms of, fans at home, people going abroad for Champions League matches. So we're picking up on a lot of these basic details. On the next slide, we've different approaches. This is where it gets interesting for us university wise in supporting the more, let's say, established benchmarked tools which we're using, such as PACE, and augmenting that through different approaches. So what we're looking for is the opportunity to work with interested parties who would like to explore the ways in which they could approach this. So we use many tools with basic things like optimization, which helps to identify what seems to be the best approach. But also it's very interesting and cool to use things like gaming theory, where you can actually get a better understanding for the sensitivities on all of these. And that, again, that's something we can look at from the university perspective through different types of projects. I think there's a final slide which just shows this is one scenario. You don't need to look at the figures. It's just the idea that we can produce, of course, the students tools which are easy to use, where you break up maybe the different types of people who are the players, the staff, the fans, the home fans, the away fans, etc., and to try and estimate what that sort of a footprint is like. Now, in terms of the projects already with Sarah and FGA, we have had certain projects that are being given out as part of master's courses. For example, as part of the airline operations course, we've given things out. So if you have a little pet area that you want to work with us, get in touch with Sarah on that, and it goes up through. Then you can get a full master's student on a particular project. Brilliant experience for the master's student. Typically free unless you want to help them with lunches and green transport to their place of work. And right up to the PhD level. And of course, we're as a team, we're looking at national and international funding to try and extend that impact. I'll hand back to you, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Ricky. Yeah, as you said, it is a great, it's great to get a team together, especially with academia. I've personally worked and mentored about 20 students. I'm currently working with 6 master's students to support us. Well, they want the challenge of sustainable flying green. They're going to get involved in the next 2 months. So it's a really great way, and students love to work on topics, especially around sport and football. It's a very good case study for them, and they really enjoy it. So absolutely, if there's anybody on the call that is interested in a research project, being part of a consortium or grant, we would definitely encourage you to reach out and see which projects we're involved with at the moment. It is a really great way as a test bed to test, if you're not ready for things to be commercial, and we know we're on this sort of tipping point of environment, ESG being in the budget, sustainability or carbon pricing being in the budget. It's not always there right now. So what we're doing is being able to test at research level to then demonstrate, either through modeling, analytics, that what we're suggesting will be able to fit in and embed into the business going forward. Oh, Ricky?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what you said there. Nothing is too small or stupid for us to look at and to consider at a certain level, and the same on the big scale. We're up for that as well. So please do get in touch with Sarah if you've any ideas. And I can see from the chat that there's got to be quite a few people interested in exploring possibilities with the team. Please do.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, there's I think about there's been over 50 people have signed up today. Some are going to get the recording later and things like that. The numbers on even signing up has tripled from our webinars a few years ago. So that's kind of an encouraging sign that the work is starting to develop. Obviously, we know from the environmental pressure, it definitely needs to accelerate. So we're kind of here in this position to be able to be that support. So with Sokito, we definitely think travel and sustainable efforts are collectively our mission and our interests. And I think I'm handing back to. Oh, hang on. I'm going to let me see if right. 1 second.
I definitely think players and clubs can work together in this. I think players, when you are in the driving seat trying to get a transfer done, you have quite a lot of power. This can also be the right moment to express your concerns and also ask the club to contribute. But I think in general it should be something that is governed across all transfers, a rule that can be put in place, because there's thousands and thousands happening worldwide. It could be a fantastic idea, because all those small contributions can make a big change, and if not, it can also raise more awareness. So I think clubs and players should be working together. and hopefully the government bodies will also step in and make sure that everyone is held accountable and takes responsibility over a process which can be quite quick and easy, but can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's great to hear from Will there. He's literally put his words into practice. He's able to, yeah, it's work that is important to him, and as he says, players and clubs can work together. So it is different pieces of work, and actually, generally, you know, a player's travel is booked for them, but of course, players are in a position to ask and to make suggestions. So that is the work of Sokito and their team. And I will, yeah, this is kind of our want for our webinar, and this is I'll hand over to Liam to start the conversation on Transfer Green.
Yeah, well, this is as you said, that I think we have a sort of shared interest and vision in terms of, you know, what we would like to try and change, but we want to obviously work collaboratively with players and clubs and organizations. So I think that the next step in our work and what we've been discussing is, you know, what actions can we share with players and clubs, you know, ahead of the January transfer window that they can look to sort of implement, you know, starting with very simple actions, whether it's, you know, using an EV taxi rather than petrol or taking the train. But if they're very receptive, then obviously, you know, in a position to discuss using sustainable aviation fuel, you know, when using private jets. So it's just some of the examples on the sort of the flight side ideas that we're going to be sharing with clubs, and have actually shared with a few clubs who are showing some interest. On to the next slide. Yeah, and then just again, based on our experience with Will, just some very simple things that people can do, you know, certainly within the sort of entourage as well, that are traveling with the player to reduce their sort of impact. But I think what's interesting, obviously, working with players, because a lot of players, I think, have been contacting Will, asking about his experience, how it worked. The more sort of visible we can make it in terms of some of these changes, I think the better.
Thank you, Liam. And yeah, so Liam has definitely been speaking from a player perspective, and we're probably more speaking from a club and FA perspective. And we have done work with certain sports, and we've calculated travel movements, and we have made estimates of offsetting and SAFs and things like that. So we've got frameworks for reduce, replace, consolidate, electrify, and offset travel. As we've said before, it is definitely about researching, getting everybody that's working in the team trained on environmental topics, business developing, working on pilots, innovating your business models, definitely innovating your sponsorship list, and getting advice and putting it in the budget. So these are our kind of wants and asks, and also it isn't just football that is under the spotlight, and it's also not just football that's increasing its championship size. Pretty much every single sport is. It just football does get more attention. I think it is because of the revenue generated. So when I go back to the slide that one of the start slides, the capacity to create such revenue and have such influence is that kind of important impact point, is that there really is a very big opportunity for football to accelerate work, to get involved with really interesting sponsorships and pilots, but put it into the operating model, because this work needs potentially sometimes years of research and piloting to get things right. And it is really finding those greener sponsors. So we've got different pieces of work that we have been doing. We've actually just launched a documentary, our first documentary this week, sponsored by Convex Insurance. I'll send that out to the group once we finish. Here's the QR code for the hub that has got all information, groups, influencers, especially working in sport and football. And then we've written white papers and trends to support the kind of business decision making around this topic. So you feel free to reach out to Liam and I on different topics, and I can then, if anybody's interested in really getting into the detail of flying aircraft's carbon, I can introduce to PACE and City University, and we can also discuss the transfer window findings more. We didn't necessarily want to discuss everything or put things into a table, but we want to know that amount of, we can kind of look into that amount of data and make assumptions and make some impact projects there. So I would like to know if anybody's got any questions for us. It would be good to hear from anybody if you've got any initial thoughts or questions for any of the team. Please come off mute or come on camera. It's good to hear from you.
All right, Sarah, good presentation, and Liam and team. So my question is, when you did mention you are working a bit with farmers somewhere, so when you are working with these farmers, do you have specific crops you are focusing to support that can offset the carbon? And when you look at crops, are there specific crops you are looking to support? And then in terms of trees, do you have specific trees that you are focusing on that when a group is working on, you are more likely to work with them? And then the final one, how is the program involving the marginalized community or the grassroots football competitions going around the small countries like Africa? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So when I think you were referring to the offset project that Will has involved with. So Liam, do you want to, and then I can also talk about crops and grass.
Yeah, sure. It's so it's an organization called Albarami. They're based in Italy, and it's a sort of voluntary offset model that they run, but they work specifically with farmers. The industry is predominantly, I think, olive, so olive oil production, which has been hit, quite hard by climate change, extreme weather conditions, and also a disease called Xylella. In terms of what they do on the kind of the practical side of offsetting, it's quite mixed. So it's a combination of introducing more sustainable practices, so ditching, pesticides, different approaches to land management, replacing dead trees, olive trees mainly, which I think are meant to be sort of super carbon catchers, I think. But I can send you a link to their site, and it gives you full details in terms of the work they do from a sort of holistic point of view through to how the carbon is actually being measured and captured.
Yeah, and on the crops, this is a topic with sustainable aviation fuels. Is it made from crops? So there is now some legislation and rules in the EU which doesn't allow biofuels to be made from feed or food, as it is being called. But what it can be made from is some non-feed or food crops and the residues from crops. So this is all kind of been developing over the last few years and now legislated. So, but of course, you need to work out regionally what is legislated or not. The EU, I know, is leading here, and the US has different legislation and things like that. So happy to kind of if you want to speak further on that, we can definitely discuss later. And that we also discuss it in our documentary, to the science and the feedstock, as it's called, the material. And then on discussion on marginalised communities, we're actually been working with Birmingham County FA, and they have created carbon literacy training for grassroots. So if you are interested in having the training initially, you can also reach out to me, and I'll put you in touch with Richard at Birmingham County. So I've also been a test person for the training, and it's really good training that gets everybody kind of up to a certain level of understanding of carbon literacy training. So that's, yeah, for grassroots football. So there is many initiatives, because as we know, each region is different and we cannot, it's not the same. So we need to understand this and put that into our work as well. It's definitely important. Anybody else got any questions? I think we're a few minutes before. Oh yeah, Jeremy.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this very nice presentations and the organization of this webcast. I would have one question for you, Liam and Sarah. If a football player or a player's agency wants to take action regarding this transfer window, so to calculate their carbon footprint and maybe also then to compensate the impact of their carbons, what would be your main recommendations to go away from any pitfalls or criticism that they could get?
I mean, I think initially it is knowing what you are offsetting with. So this is why we're also about to create the report offsetting, setting and book and claim, because we're going to be given advice on how to find the right project, because there are now also rating agencies for different projects, so that they rate them on social aspects, environmental aspects, align projects with SDGs. We know that gold standard, for example, is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So there is definitely advice, and you can you can come to consultants to support on that. And then it's kind of, I would say, it's doing your due diligence so that you know what it is and that it's a quality certified. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around tree planting. Now we know it is an effective carbon sink, but some of the projects have had some skepticism and they've found they're not as effective as they thought. So there's also now even Kita is one insurance where it insures against the buyer. No, it insures the buyer so that if their offset project doesn't deliver, for example, they are able to recuperate that that carbon loss in a way. So there is a new initiatives. So that's what we're going to put into our report. It's all of our advice. Oh, sorry, I've got trouble going. Liam, would you take over for now?
And Liam, my question was also on the communication aspect, on how to go loud on it.
Well, I definitely see it can be a challenge. But I think as long as the player sort of acknowledges that it's a gesture rather than being, here's a kind of complete solution, then I think that makes a difference. So even if it's a case of he obviously has to take a flight if he's going from the UK to Germany, but if he says, or she says, I can't avoid the flights, but I will ensure that all my journeys in the UK and Germany around the transfer are by EV taxi, whether it's booking at Uber Green or something like this, and just. Yeah, so it's quite a small gesture, but obviously we know this can be quite powerful. But then you can go up, I guess, if there are the really high-profile players who, for security reasons, have to take a private jet, and it's a genuine reason they have to take it. Then they can say, well, we've just had Virgin flying on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. I want to do something similar with the transfer. So it's with the work with Ben and then Will, and then the next player just keeps kind of upping the ante. I think would be a positive and constructive thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the influence of players. As we know it, they have a big amount of influence, and if they're even to kind of ask the questions back to the club, it then begins a conversation. And then once enough, as you say, once enough are saying we want this way, that's when budget, attention, and planning goes towards it. So that's kind of what we are hoping. And now you're at Common Goal, Jeremy. So you've do you want to? Yeah, I know it's coming to the end of an hour. So if anybody wants to drop off, then feel free. If anybody wants to stay and ask any further questions, then let me know. We can also follow up. I'm going to send the recording and any of the links we've got to everybody on that signed up. So feel free to read and ask and continue. So Ricky, do you want to?
Yeah, I need to go to catch a train now in 10 minutes. So I'm going to run. Note that it's a train.
Right.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. And like I said to everyone, please get in touch with us and let us know how we can build further with this. And thanks for the opportunity, of course, Sarah, and all the hard work putting this together for us all.
Yeah,
well done.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll speak to you soon. Have a good Christmas.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Sarah and Liam, I will get in touch so we can engage more.
Sounds good. Sorry, I'm just.
All right. But thanks for the presentation. I got something that's exciting. I love environment. I love football, and I'm keen to keep the conversation.